Melania Trump walks into her own aviation showroom in disguise, only to be underestimated by her own staff. Witness the shocking twist that teaches a lesson in respect. Like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on this eye-opening encounter. Melania Trump stepped out of her modest sedan into the bustling lot of AeroLux Jets, the flagship dealership she had recently acquired in Sunville. The summer heat shimmered off the sleek fuselages of the private jets parked in a pristine row. Each aircraft's glossy finish practically radiated sophistication under the relentless sunlight. She parked in an inconspicuous spot at the far end of the lot, away from the gleaming showpieces, and took a moment to scan the building's facade. Her outfit for the day was unassuming, a gray hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers. This was no accident. She wanted to see how the dealership truly operated when no one recognized her as the new owner, a strategy she had used to great success in her business endeavors. As she approached the entrance, she spotted a cluster of employees inside, gathered around the front desk. Their lighthearted laughter and casual chatter floated through the glass doors. Melania stepped inside, greeted by the icy embrace of the air conditioning. The space was immaculate, the faint scent of leather upholstery and jet fuel lingering in the air. Private jets, polished to perfection, sat under a network of bright showroom lights. The employees' laughter subsided almost immediately as she entered. Glances flitted toward her attire, a silent yet palpable appraisal. Melania caught the subtle change in their demeanor but didn't let it faze her. She was here to observe. From across the room, a poised figure appeared. Elena, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit, approached with deliberate strides. The rhythmic click of her polished heels on the marble floor echoed in the otherwise quiet space. Her fitted blazer, clipboard in hand, an air of authority exuded professionalism, but her tight-lipped smile hinted at something less welcoming. "Good afternoon," Elena said, her tone cool and clipped. "Can I assist you with something?" Melania returned a calm smile. "I'm just here to look around," she said casually, gesturing toward the lineup of jets. Elena's eyes narrowed as she gave Melania a once-over. The judgment in her gaze was subtle but unmistakable. "Are you considering making a purchase?" she asked, her tone edged with skepticism. Melania nodded lightly. "Something like that." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, our inventory caters to a very exclusive clientele. Most of our models require pre-qualification. Perhaps I could recommend..." Before Elena could finish, another employee called out, "Hey, Elena, the catering truck is here." Elena glanced toward the source of the interruption, then turned back to Melania, as if reluctant to lose track of her. Melania raised an eyebrow but maintained her composure. "You're assuming I'm not qualified?" she asked, her tone even. The question seemed to throw Elena off balance for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her footing, her posture stiffening. "I'm simply trying to save you some time," she replied with a tight smile. "These aircraft start at 8 figures. Perhaps I could direct you to..." Melania turned her attention to a nearby jet, a sleek silver model with a bold, aerodynamic design. Her hand lightly brushed the polished wingtip as she glanced back at Elena. "Beautiful jet," she remarked simply. Elena hesitated, her brows furrowing ever so slightly before she forced another strained smile. "It is. Perhaps when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can schedule an appointment." "I'll have to ask you not to touch the jets," Elena said, her tone sharp. Melania stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. Then with a calm nod, she stepped back from the silver jet and tucked her hands into her pockets. She gestured lightly toward Elena. "All right, let's hear it. What would you recommend for someone like me?" Elena blinked, her composure faltering briefly at the directness of the question. Before she could form a reply, Melania added with a slight smile, "If you think you know what I need, I'm all ears." The veneer of politeness slipped just enough for Melania to catch the exasperation underneath. "Maybe something more budget-friendly," Elena finally said. "I could point you toward a dealership that specializes in pre-owned aircraft." Melania smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She had seen enough. "That's quite the assumption," she said softly. Her words lingered in the air, and for a brief moment, Elena hesitated, the confidence in her stance flickering. Regaining her composure, Elena straightened her blazer. "I'll be back with a list of options," she said briskly, turning on her heel and walking away. Melania watched her go, her face unreadable. She turned her gaze back to the silver jet, her reflection distorted in the glossy finish. This day was shaping up to be exactly as revealing as she had hoped. The quiet hum of conversation resumed around the showroom, and Melania noticed the staff sneaking glances in her direction. She was no stranger to these silent judgments, the fleeting appraisals. Over the years, she had grown used to it, but today was different. Today, it was part of the plan. Elena returned moments later, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She held her clipboard like a shield, her forced smile as thin as the paper she carried. "All right," she said, stopping a few feet away. "I've compiled compiled a few options that might be more suitable for your situation. Melania tilted her head slightly. My situation? Elena's lips tightened. Yes, she said, extending a printout toward Melania. The list was a collection of older, smaller jets, each with detailed descriptions and price tags well below the dealership's typical offerings. These are more accessible models, Elena said, her tone matter-of-fact. Reliable, economical, and practical. Melania glanced at the list, a faint glimmer of amusement dancing in her eyes. She folded the paper neatly and slipped it into her pocket. I appreciate the effort, she said evenly. For a brief moment, Elena seemed thrown by her calm response, but she recovered quickly, crossing her arms in a stance of authority. Her voice dropped slightly, as if sharing a confidential truth. Listen, she said, I'm just trying to be realistic with you. AeroLux Jets isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time. Melania met Elena's gaze steadily. Her voice was calm yet firm. And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer? Elena hesitated, but only for a fraction of a second. I've been in this business a long time, she replied. I can tell when someone's out of their depth. Out of my depth? Melania repeated, her tone neutral, almost contemplative. Interesting. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Elena's face, but she pressed on. I'm just being honest, she said. It's better to be upfront than to let someone leave here disappointed. Melania chuckled softly, shaking her head. Honesty. I like that. She took a step closer, her voice steady but commanding. How about this? You let me speak to the owner. Think we can make that happen? Elena's brows shot up in surprise. For the first time, her confidence seemed to waver. The owner? She stammered. That's not possible today. The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits. They're a busy person. It's all right, Vincent, Melania interjected, her voice steady but layered with subtle authority. I think Elena and I were just getting to know each other. Elena's face flushed a deep crimson, her earlier confidence crumbling under the weight of realization. She clutched her clipboard tightly, her fingers whitening around its edges as her gaze darted nervously between Melania and Vincent. Mrs. Trump, Vincent began, turning toward her with a respectful bow of his head. Please accept my apologies for any misunderstanding. I assure you this is not reflective of how we conduct business at AeroLux Jets. Melania offered a faint smile, her composure as unshaken as ever. No need for formalities, Vincent. I wanted to experience the showroom as any customer would, and I did. The weight of her words hung in the air. Elena visibly swallowed, her discomfort impossible to hide. Mrs. Trump, she stammered. I had no idea. Melania raised a hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. You didn't know, she said. But that's the point, isn't it? How we treat people when we don't know who they are says everything about our values. Wouldn't you agree? Elena's lips parted, but no response came. Instead, her shoulders slumped slightly, and she nodded, her gaze fixed on the polished floor. Vincent, sensing the tension, quickly stepped in. Elena, I believe it would be a good time to review the customer service protocols we discussed at the last meeting, he said, his tone professional, yet pointed. We'll address this matter later. Elena nodded mutely and excused herself, retreating toward the back offices. The other staff, still frozen in the periphery, quickly busied themselves, though their curiosity was palpable. Vincent turned back to Melania. Again, Mrs. Trump, I deeply regret this. If there's anything I can do, relax, Vincent, Melania said, her tone softening. It was enlightening, and frankly, it's why I'm here. I want to ensure this dealership isn't just selling jets, but building trust. I think we both know there's work to be done. Vincent nodded solemnly. Understood. I'll personally oversee the adjustments. Melania glanced toward the silver jet she had admired earlier, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. That's what I like to hear. Let's start by making sure every customer, regardless of how they walk through those doors, gets the respect they deserve. Vincent followed her gaze to the jet, a small smile breaking through his professional demeanor. It's a fine choice, he said. Shall I arrange a test flight? Melania tilted her head, considering. Not today. Let's just make sure it's ready for someone who truly appreciates it. With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her modest outfit and steady stride a stark contrast to the weight of her presence. The staff, still shaken, watched in silence as she disappeared through the doors. Only then did the room seem to exhale, the tension dissipating like a storm that had finally passed. Outside, the sunlight glinted off the rows of gleaming jets as Melania stepped into her car. She smiled faintly, satisfied that the lesson she had intended was delivered, not just to Elena, but to everyone in the room. Sometimes the best way to lead was to remind people that humility and respect were worth more than any luxury on display. I just got off on the wrong foot. Melania Trump's voice was calm, but there was a weight to her words that made the entire room fall silent. Elena's face turned pale, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a lifeline. I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. You didn't know what? Melania asked, her tone still gentle but carrying a firmness that couldn't be ignored. That I could own a place like this? That someone like me might actually belong here? Elena's eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed utterly lost. I didn't mean... Melania held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. It's fine, Elena, really, she said, stepping closer. Her voice dropped just enough to make everyone in the room lean in. But let me ask you something. If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me any differently? Would you have given me the same respect you give someone who walked in here wearing a suit and tie? Elena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence in the room was deafening. Melania nodded as if her silence was answer enough and turned to Vincent, her voice carrying a new authority. Vincent, gather everyone in the conference room. I think it's time we had a little talk about how things are run around here. The employees shuffled into the sleek conference room, the air thick with tension. The space, designed to impress with its glass walls and modern furnishings, felt stifling under the circumstances. Elena sat near the back, her usual confident demeanor replaced with visible unease. Melania stood at the head of the table, calm and collected, her commanding presence drawing every eye in the room. Vincent leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, as he watched the staff take their seats. The quiet murmur of whispers died down as Melania cleared her throat, her gaze sweeping across the group. "Thank you all for joining me on such short notice," she began, her tone measured but firm. "For those of you who don't know, my name is Melania Trump, and I'm the new owner of AeroLux Jets." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room, the reactions ranging from curiosity to outright embarrassment. Elena sank lower in her chair, her gaze fixed firmly on the table in front of her. "I came here today dressed casually for a reason," Melania continued, her voice steady and unwavering. "I wanted to see how this showroom operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience what a potential client might feel when they walk through those doors." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What I experienced today was disappointing. I wasn't judged for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked." She glanced briefly at Elena, then returned her gaze to the room as a whole. "I'm not here to single anyone out," she said, her voice firm but fair. "But we need to have an honest conversation about what that says about the culture of this dealership." Elena shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed with embarrassment. Melania's eyes flicked to her briefly before continuing. "This isn't just about me," Melania said, her tone rising slightly to fill the room. "It's about every person who walks through those doors, every customer who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived notion of what a luxury aircraft buyer should look like." One of the younger sales associates, Chris, hesitantly raised his hand. Melania nodded toward him. "Go ahead." "Mrs. Trump," Chris began nervously, "I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions." Melania nodded thoughtfully, her expression softening slightly. "I understand," she said. "We all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not. But here's the thing, it's not enough to just try to be fair. We have to actively challenge those biases. We need to create an environment where everyone feels respected, no matter their appearance, background, or anything else." She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle over the room. "AeroLux Jets has built a reputation for excellence, but excellence isn't just about the airplanes. We sell airplanes, but it's about the experience we provide," Melania Trump said, her tone steady yet commanding. "And from now on, that experience is going to be built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness." There was a ripple of agreement across the room, though a few faces remained cautious, their wariness visible. Melania's gaze landed on Elena, who sat frozen in her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Elena," Melania said gently but firmly, "I want to give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say?" All eyes turned to Elena. She hesitated, her voice barely audible when she finally spoke. "I made a mistake," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "I misjudged you, and for that, I'm truly sorry." Melania nodded, her expression neutral but thoughtful. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "I hope this experience will serve as a reminder for all of us, not just you, because change starts with accountability." Turning back to the group, her voice strengthened. "Moving forward, we'll be implementing new training programs to ensure this showroom represents the values I believe in. Every customer deserves to be treated with dignity, no exceptions. If anyone has an issue with that, now's the time to speak up." Silence filled the room, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. No one spoke, but the weight of Melania's words pressed down on everyone. Letting the quiet linger just long enough to make her point, Melania continued, her voice calm but resolute. "Good. I'm glad to see we're all on the same page. Change isn't always easy, but it's necessary, and this dealership is going to lead by example." She leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the edge of the sleek table. Her gaze swept across the group. "Let me make one thing clear. I didn't come here today to humiliate anyone. I came to understand the culture I've inherited and figure out how we can make it better." Her eyes moved to Elena, who was still sitting quietly near the back. "Elena," she said, softening her tone enough to show this wasn't an attack, "you're an experienced manager, and I know you've worked hard to get where you are. But today was a wake-up call, not just for you, but for all of us." Elena met her gaze for the first time. Her voice was shaky but sincere. "I understand. I was wrong, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Melania nodded. I believe in second chances, she said simply, but accountability comes first. We'll meet one-on-one to discuss next steps. For now, let's focus on moving forward. Straightening, she turned back to the rest of the team. We're not just selling airplanes here. We're building trust, creating relationships, and representing a standard of excellence. If you're on board with that, I'm here to support you every step of the way. This time, the murmurs of agreement were louder and more genuine. The staff began to relax, the earlier tension giving way to a sense of shared purpose. Even Vincent, who had been standing quietly by the door, nodded in approval. Melania allowed herself a faint smile, the kind that spoke of both relief and determination. All right then, she said, let's get back to work. And remember, how we treat people matters more than anything we sell. As the employees filed out, Melania noticed Elena lingering by the door. She approached hesitantly, her hands twisting nervously. Mrs. Trump, she began, her voice low. I want to thank you for giving me a chance to do better. I won't let you down. Melania studied her for a moment before responding, her voice steady. I hope you mean that, Elena. Actions speak louder than words. But I believe people can change if they're willing to try. Elena nodded, her eyes earnest. I am. Melania watched her leave before turning to Vincent. Let's set up a follow-up meeting with the staff next week, she said. Vincent nodded. Consider it done. I want to make sure everyone knows what's expected moving forward, Melania said, her tone resolute. Vincent grinned, a newfound respect for her evident in his expression. You've got it, boss. As Melania stepped back into the showroom, she paused to take in the sleek planes around her, their polished surfaces gleaming in the soft afternoon light. She thought about the challenges ahead, about reshaping not just the operation, but the mindset of the team. Yet for the first time that day, she felt a spark of optimism. This wasn't just about running a dealership, it was about creating something more meaningful, a place where people were judged by their character, not their appearance. And Melania was ready to lead that transformation. Later that week, Melania observed Elena interacting with a new client, a young artist dressed casually, much like she herself had been during her earlier visit. Elena's demeanor was noticeably different. She engaged warmly, listening intently as the artist spoke about their dreams of owning a small private plane to support their creative travels. Her body language radiated genuine interest and respect, a stark contrast to the judgmental attitude she had displayed before. This small but significant moment signaled the beginning of the cultural shift Melania had envisioned. Seeing Elena take that first step reinforced her belief that change was possible and that the path they were on was the right one. It was a victory, not a grand one, but one that hinted at a brighter future for AeroLux Jets, a future where inclusivity and respect define their success as much as the luxury aircraft they sold. All stories shared on this platform are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. We advocate for a world where everyone is treated with respect, dignity, and fairness. Our goal is to share uplifting narratives that inspire growth, kindness, and progress in society. Any resemblance to real events, individuals, or organizations is purely coincidental and unintentional. These stories are not intended to reference any actual people, events, or entities, and they contain no political or religious connotations.